Welcome back to our channel, where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. William's bold action as a king has left Camilla in tears. Recent events in the British monarchy have highlighted a notable transformation in the dynamics of royal authority and popular image. King Charles's choice to assign Prince William a new position has exacerbated family discord and established the reconfiguration of the monarchy's future. This action has elicited a range of responses, including Prince Harry's alleged indignation and Queen Camilla's concern over Prince William's rise to the throne. The ramifications of these changes are significant, signifying Prince William's symbolic upheaval as a crucial juncture in the monarchy's history. An abrupt shift in the axis of monarchical authority. For almost a millennium, the British crown has endured by projecting an image of constancy, even while it continually adapts its significance to align with the prevailing era. In early 2025, the concealed process became momentarily apparent, similar to a submarine, temporarily surfacing when King Charles requested his oldest son to undertake a series of strategic duties typically designated for a ruling king. Courtiers framed the transfer in the neutral terms of supporting His Majesty's vision, although the court's gossip network immediately saw it as a clear change in influence. Prince William, currently the Prince of Wales and Duke of Cornwall, will now oversee the duchy's multi-million-pound Sustainable Development Initiative, preside over bi-weekly strategy meetings with the Cabinet Office regarding constitutional outreach, and most notably manage a new public engagement compact that restricts which working royals can accept patronages. Although these were seemingly minor changes, they effectively established William as the monarchy's co-pilot well before the throne became vacant. Prince Harry, as reported by acquaintances in California, was blindsided by his brother's decision to establish parameters that dictate the public positions the Sussexes had endeavored to redefine. At the other end of the castle, Queen Camilla allegedly accepted the news with a sardonic smirk and a raised eyebrow, perceiving that the heir's growing portfolio may eventually diminish her own. While King Charles discreetly assured close associates that he was entirely in control, he also humorously remarked, partly with admiration and partly with regret, that William's generation has jet engines, while his own depended on dignified steam. The constitutional formalities are less significant than the appearance. A 76-year-old king entrusting reformative duties to a son who has inherited his mother's sensitivity to popular sentiment and his father's penchant for institutional management. A note from the king's confidential secretary heralded the premature arrival of the future. A ceremony lacking a queen, the Diana Award, and the absence of the stepmother. Should the appointment indicate a transfer of power? The first substantive test of that authority occurred 3 weeks later, inside the vaulted crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral, where the annual Diana Award was about to commence. The charity named after the late Princess of Wales has evolved into an international symbol for young activism, and for the first time, the event was presided over by a monarch who is not Diana's former husband, but the spouse of her former competitor. In previous years, Camilla had sometimes been included on the guest list, not as the main speaker, but as a cordial royal figure, augmenting the king's endorsement. Her name was absent from all schedules, briefing documents, and seating arrangements this time. Journalists inquired whether she may be doing undisclosed duties elsewhere. Aides resorted to the standard explanation of diary constraints. It subsequently became apparent that the constraints on the diary were imposed only by the Prince of Wales. William's rationale, communicated by a reliable aide, was clear in its simplicity. The day was dedicated to his mother, and the sight of Camilla cheering in the front row would inevitably overshadow the brilliance of the young award recipients and Diana herself. The aide recalled the uproar of 2007 when Camilla initially accepted an invitation to Diana's 10th anniversary memorial, only to retract her attendance amidst headlines labeling her presence as grotesque. 18 years later, the prince decided that it was preferable to eliminate the variable altogether, avoiding any more trauma, slow speculation, and misleading photos. The decision was implemented with such understated finality that even experienced reporters needed hours to ascertain it was intentional rather than an error. At the commencement of the event, the narrative had already entrenched itself in the public consciousness. William had established a protective boundary around his mother's legacy, excluding his stepmother from it. The ambience inside the crypt was contemplative, somewhat reverential. The prince spoke to the flame of empathy that Diana ignited in him and his brother. His voice quivered on the term "brathat," transient but clear allusion to the missing Harry. Upon completion, he retreated, eyes gleaming, into the shadows of the nave, precisely where his mother, camera-averse in her youth, would conceal herself behind pillars before stepping into the glare of flashbulbs. Camilla, in the meanwhile, hosted a literacy awards supper at Clarence's house, posing amiably for pictures among original volumes of Jane Austen. The concurrent interactions feigned ignorance of one another, but all observers saw the intentional symmetry: two women, two legacies, two entries in a familial ledger that would never achieve equilibrium. The coronation gesture that predicted the future. Astute onlookers attributed William's boldness to a brief incident in Westminster Abbey in May 2023, when the Golden Spurs had hardly been transported down the aisle when the cameras captured an anomaly. The newly crowned king remained still under St. Edward's crown while his heir knelt, kissed his father's jeweled ring, and stood up. The protocol recommended, indeed, mandated that the prince should likewise bow to the queen consort. Instead, he adjusted his position slightly to prevent turning his back on the altar, focused his attention on Charles, and departed. Camilla, perhaps recognizing the discomfort, subtly tilted her head in a nearly imperceptible manner, as if to absolve her stepson of a duty. I concentrated on the grandeur, the violet trains, the vocalists, and the uncooperative weather that reduced the RAF flyover to a disheveled formation of helicopters. However, inside newsrooms, video of the bow that wasn't was repeatedly shown in slow motion. Body language analysts scrutinized the prince's shoulders. Lip readers interpreted the queen's whisper. All fine, darling, and social media advocates said that the 6-second footage was evidence of either William's virtuous devotion or his inexcusable impoliteness. Upon reflection, the little insurrection foreshadowed all subsequent events. An heir prepared to honor the institution but reluctant to engage in actions that contravene his principles. From antagonism to conditional amity, the prolonged education of a blended family. William's association with his stepmother started, notably, with a strong alcoholic beverage. In 1998, shortly after Diana's death, Charles arranged a secret tea at Highgrove for the adolescent princes to meet Camilla away from the scrutiny of cameras. A footman disclosed years later that Camilla requested something to steady the nerves, consumed half a tumbler of gin, and entered the drawing room pale as the hydrangeas. William, courteous even in sorrow, William remained courteous, shook hands, spoke minimally, and left, exhaling only upon hearing the Land Rover traverse the gravel. The subsequent decade fluctuated between peace and conflict. While in university, William disclosed to a friend that he would never, ever develop a strong relationship with Dad's lady, but he had reconciled with the fact that she would eventually become queen. Camilla, for her part, used a policy of benign invisibility, always amiable, although never intimate. In 2005, when Charles wooed her, William humorously toasted the newlyweds, remarking on two individuals well-versed in patience. Guests chuckled, the bride flushed, the groom fought back tears. Over time, minor tensions escalated boisterous disputes during hunting weekends, rumors that Camilla labeled William's media briefings as PR stunts, and counter-rumors that William dubbed his stepmother the Rottweiler's understudy. Nevertheless, difficulty cultivates careful unity. Throughout Charles's 2023 cancer treatment, William and Camilla attended several events together, maintaining smiles despite their exhaustion and exchanging dark humor about hospital gowns. Royal historian Sally Bedell Smith compared them to crewmates lashed to the same mast. Nevertheless, insiders recognized that their relationship had boundaries. Diana's specter served as a sentinel, and William's regard could never be misconstrued as pure fondness. Palace chess, the king's silence, and the courtiers' discontent behind fans. The exclusion of Camilla from the Diana Award banquet at Buckingham Palace initiated a subtle chain reaction. One faction expressed concern that the decision may revive Camilla, the usurper headlines at a time when her popularity ratings were finally favorable. A different faction, mostly of younger personnel associated with William's office, contended that transparency is preferable to concession. Viewers loathe the semblance of cynicism more than they are troubled by the actuality of familial discord. A seasoned equerry, having served both Queen Elizabeth and King Charles, lamented that we are in a new reign where apparitions cast ballots. Charles refrained from making any public remarks, his typical strategy to avoid emotional involvement. However, the king did authorize, 2 weeks later, an investiture at Windsor when Camilla was awarded the Order of the Thistle, Scotland's premier chivalric honor, therefore enhancing her position without addressing the prior slight. Court columnists saw the action as a compensating embrace, Charles bolstering Camilla's stature while implicitly affirming William's authority to manage Diana's legacy. If the royal family functions like a symphony, here was the conductor directing two soloists to continue performing in divergent keys, discordant but, in some way, still harmonious. The nation communicates, pollsters, commentary sections, and the perpetual pull of Diana. The public mood adhered to the anticipated divisions. Polls indicate that Camilla's favorability with baby boomers is over 50%. A significant improvement from the single-digit lows seen in the 1990s. However, millennials and Gen Z participants still saw Diana as the most esteemed royal figure behind the late Queen Elizabeth, surpassing even William and Catherine. Within that group, Camilla's approval ratings fell below 35%, indicating that young idealism persists in seeing the past as a precursor. Columnists in The Guardian lauded William's instinctive corrective to history, whereas The Telegraph criticized him for borderline discourtesy. On TikTok, the hashtag Princess Diana trended for 48 hours, accumulating 63 million views of archival footage and amateur historians recounting the timeline of the Wales's marital disintegration. A viral post depicted Diana greeting AIDS patients without gloves, juxtaposed with Camilla in the coronation coach. The caption stated, "One queen earned her crown, the other borrowed it." Another video compiled Camilla's extensive charity visits, concluding with the phrase, "Grace under fire." Online nostalgia overshadowed subtlety. You go in 42% affirmed, 29% denied, and the remainder expressed uncertainty, indicative of a society that remains civilly split, just as William's private polls had forecasted. The prince wagered that a higher number of Britons would commend his filial devotion rather than criticize his aloofness. Preliminary figures indicate he was accurate, albeit the margin is narrow. Phantoms in the passage, historical reverberations from Edward VI to Queen Adelaide. Royal historians, pleased when the present mirrors the past, promptly provided background. Wallis Simpson, whose very presence compelled a monarch to abdicate, lived her widowhood in a Paris suburb, getting no invitations to official functions and using her HRH title only on private correspondence. Joan of Navarre, the stepmother of Henry V, was marginalized upon her husband's death and then incarcerated on tenuous accusations of witchcraft. Queen Adelaide, the step-aunt of Queen Victoria, receded into charitable obscurity upon the ascension of the adolescent queen. The enduring truth throughout generations is that a stepmother's influence seldom persists beyond the reign of the monarch who adores her. Camilla's situation is far milder, although the principle of gravity remains applicable. Upon Charles's eventual demise, she will assume the title of Queen Dowager, a prestigious designation without formal authority. William, holding both the monarchy and public support, will decide which of Camilla's charities get funding, which royal houses she maintains, and the frequency of her name in the court circular. Precedent indicates he will be magnanimous. Temperament implies he will also be resolute. In other terms, hers will be a tranquil period of semi-retirement, neither marginalized nor pivotal. Monetary units, principalities, and the conclusion of familial preference, the Eliot precedent. Indications of that possibility emerged when William, just assuming charge of the Duchy of Cornwall's £1.2 billion inheritance, discreetly opted not to extend the consulting of interior designer Annabel Elliot, the younger sister of Camilla. For 17 years, Elliot managed the elegant renovations of Duchy cottages. Her departure, noted on a single line of the Duchy's annual report, potentially saved 90,000 annually insignificant by royal standards, but symbolically invaluable. It informed taxpayers that nepotism would not endure throughout a transition and conveyed to courtiers that William's austerity measures would disregard any emotional ties. Even Camilla's supporters acknowledged that the optics were immaculate. One wittily noted he dismissed her with an accountant's comma, not a guillotine. Earthshot and early years. How William and Catherine are formulating the mission statement for the next reign. In addition to managing personalities, Prince William is actively defining the crown's role amidst climate concerns and mental health problems. The Earthshot Prize directs private investment toward environmental innovations. The Homewards Initiative addresses homelessness via data-driven local collaborations, and the Heads Together campaign, co-established with Catherine and Prince Harry prior to the Sussex division, promotes discussion surrounding depression and suicide. Every initiative is externally focused, quantifiable, and directed towards constituents rather than sycophants, a principle William encapsulates for his assistants as public value or mere vanity. Catherine emulates that strategy with her Center for Early Childhood, assembling neuroscientists, pediatricians, and technology entrepreneurs to convert academic research into policy toolkits for local councils. Insiders elucidate that the technique is intentional. William confronts systemic difficulties affecting adults and the earth, while Catherine focuses on the early years of infancy, when such crises often originated. The complementary agendas serve two public relations objectives. They modernize the monarchy's image to appear solution-oriented and enhance the couple's appeal through initiatives that go beyond ceremonial functions. Identify the blueprint. She also saw deficiencies, HIV, homelessness, landmines, and engaged with them, often towing institutional apparatus along. Where she engaged as an insurgent, William and Catherine function as internal reformers, refining the rough aspects via committees and measurements, although the moral heritage remains evident. The common DNA elucidates why the prince would not let Camilla attend his mother's commemorations. The Diana brand is not only nostalgic, it is the foundation of his contemporary kingdom. The future, a leaner, more acute, and more emotional monarchy. If the monarchy were a corporation, William is formulating an organizational structure for 2050. The envisioned balcony scene comprises the sovereign and consort, their immediate offspring, George Charlotte Louis, the sovereign's sibling princess, Charlotte potentially serving as counselor, Prince Counselor retaining her role as senior elder, and possibly a restricted representation from the Wessex line. All others, including a somewhat aged Queen Dowager Camilla, would only embody the crown in specialized patronages or entirely private roles. The financial strategy is harsh, but widely accepted. A reduced payroll. The strategy involves reducing the payroll, reducing the number of preferential residences, eliminating Prince Andrew's £12 million security expenditure, and annually disclosing the emissions from royal travel. Lee cultivates goodwill as Republicans hover around 25% in most polls. It guarantees emotional stability. No ugly ducklings eclipsing the swan. No peripheral narratives monopolizing attention. A top federal worker said that William's strategy is monarchy as main stage, not ensemble. The cooperation of history is contingent upon circumstances beyond the control of any one prince, the lifespan of Charles, the health of Catherine, the unforeseeable repercussions of the Sussex narrative, and the economic currents that influence the financial well-being of ordinary Britons, oscillating between austerity and prosperity. By taking proactive measures, reducing expenditures, defining organizational structures, and honoring Diana, William aims to safeguard the institution from future crises. While Queen Elizabeth's brilliance lay in her unwavering stoicism, William's excellence lies in his strategic adaptability. Round harmonized between remembrance and progress. Monarchy is Mostly most gestures, such as a bent head, an absent name on a program, or the inclination of a sovereign's chin on a frigid balcony, convey monarchy. The audience perceives tales of love and competition, regret and rejuvenation. Prince William, endowed with a cameraman's flair for composition, is now rendering those actions with intentional precision. His unwillingness to associate Camilla with the memory of his mother was not a tantrum nor a mistake. It was a declaration for a reign yet to commence. The past is sacrosanct, but it should enlighten the future rather than haunt it. Should he prevail, the crown bequeathed to Prince George in the mid-21st century will be more streamlined, refined, and imbued with the emotional significance of a grandmother he never encountered. If he miscalculates, he jeopardizes reinforcing the soap opera narrative that supports the Republican position. The current probabilities seem advantageous. William's approval ratings are commendable. Catherine's popularity approaches the legendary, and even Camilla's supporters concede the prince's tactical astuteness. Britain, fatigued after a decade of controversy and pestilence, is willing to let this softly ambitious individual dictate the tempo so long as he remains cognizant of the lady whose absence continues to resonate in every philanthropic institution and newspaper survey. Consequently, the monarchy transitions not via a war cry or an abdication address, but by a courteous removal from a guest list and an unrendered bow under arched ceilings. In the extensive record of Windsor dramas, such annotations may be comparable to constitutional upheavals. They impart a lesson the crown has assimilated through pestilence, conflagration, renunciation, and conflict. At times, the most effective means of progression is to remain entirely still and let a solitary, quiet gesture convey your message. Thank you for seeing the video. Kindly share your opinions and farewell for the time being.